Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Nursing. First order of business, I would like to ask Mr. Jeremy to open us in a word of prayer.
Well, let's pray. Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for loving and caring for us and give us a new day of life. We don't want to not appreciate that. We ask you to forgive us where we failed you. Thank you for this team of leaders and this group, this organization that we can work for as we promote good public health. And just pray that you'll lead and guide us to the decisions we make today. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Darren.
Looking around, I would say that, players, we do have a quorum. And I'd like to get a motion to approve the agenda. Motion, second, Jeremy. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Open forum. Open it up to the public.
Hello, I'm Melissa Temple and I'm IHL Nursing Education Director. And I thought I would just come this morning and give you a brief update on nursing education in Mississippi. The accreditation standards and criteria for schools of nursing were updated in February. We did some changes to admission standards, just updated those. They hadn't been looked at in a little while. And that procedure manual and accreditation standards are posted on the website. Some visits that took place this past academic year. We visited Blue Mountain Christian University, who has started their first school of nursing. After a site visit in the summer, the university did receive stage 2 approval in August of 2022, which gave them permission to admit their first cohort of students, which they did in January of 2023. In spring 2023, we also visited 3 schools for reaccreditation. The annual report for schools of nursing in Mississippi was approved by the IHL Board of Trustees in May, and that annual report is now on the website that you can download and look at it in detail. We have 24 schools of nursing with 40-degree programs with multiple entry options, and you have a breakdown of those on that handout that I provided for you. The types of institutions are also broken down by public. We have 5 public universities, 4 private universities, and 15 community colleges. Some data from the annual report, just to give you an update on admissions, enrollment, and graduation. You can see that after a decline in admissions and enrollment in 2020, 2021, those numbers have increased this past year. During the academic year 21-22, there were 3,924 admissions to schools of nursing as compared to 3,874 for the previous academic year. That's a difference of about 50 more students, but we're still a little over 160 less than we were in 1920 when we had over 4,000. Enrollment in fall 2022, schools of nursing reported that we had 5,752 students enrolled as compared to 5,526 the previous fall in 2021. That's an increase of 226 students enrolled. And again, this is after we saw a decrease of over 400 in fall 20 and 21 in the wake of the pandemic. So while those numbers may not be back up to pre-COVID numbers, hopefully we won't see another decline. Graduates during the academic year 21-22, there were 2,557 graduates compared to 2,858 for the previous academic year. That's a little over 300 fewer students that graduated, but again, that was expected with the decrease in admissions and enrollment that we saw. The nursing education loan and scholarship programs that IHL has had in place, the Mississippi Office of Student Financial Aid was successful in getting these repealed this year. And that was included in that bill for loan forgiveness for new nurses. And these programs are repealed as of July 1st, 2023. This is after there were 799 applications submitted for those opportunities last year, and there was over $1 million awarded to students. So the deans and directors of schools of nursing in Mississippi have put together an ad hoc committee They want to create some new nursing grants and scholarships to introduce this next legislative session to support nursing students in pre-licensure undergraduate programs as well as graduate programs. Update on NCLEX. So far this calendar year, January 23 to May 23, we've had 694 new graduates from Mississippi Schools of Nursing take the NCLEX RN compared to 660 for January 22 to May 22 last year. The first time pass rate for this January 23 to May 23 is 88.62% compared to this time last year, it was 85.3%. So the students are doing well on their NCLEX. I'd also just like to share some administrative changes at a few colleges and universities so far. Northeast Community College has a new director, Dr. Melissa Morgan, and Belhaven University has a new dean of nursing, Dr. Johnny Sue Wijwarnda. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
I'm on my soapbox today. How extensive of a background check do y'all have for these nurses applying for these programs as far as character, integrity, honesty goes?
They have a fingerprint criminal history background check that is completed prior to admission.
And that's all.
It's a thorough background check. It's the FBI. Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to make a comment. Thank you. Dr. Temple is being timid about the update on those standards because it's been more than a few years. It's been like 11 on some of those. So that's a huge undertaking to upgrade all of those standards to be consistent with the ADN accrediting bodies as well as the AACN. So I appreciate that. I know the other academics do. My question is about the deans and directors, and I know you're not speaking on necessarily for that chair, but are there any plans to promote nurse faculty salary increases for the next legislative session?
There's been talk about that. There was not much success with coming together with a plan
Okay.
this past session. So while I'm sure it will be a topic, I don't know that there is a specific agenda or plan or strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Temple, what is the current nurse faculty vacancy rate?
We had, I believe it's 23. The majority are in your associate degree programs at the community college level.
Other questions?
What's the salary range for those?
I can't really give you an accurate salary range. Those are quite variable among the community colleges and the universities. You have some community colleges that may start out at around 48 or 50,000 for a nurse faculty member, while some maybe start out at 65.
It's less than clinical. I mean, that's part of the struggle.
Why would you want to do that?
Well, because you
Have a passion for it.
and there are benefits to education, but it's certainly a disparity between the practice salaries and education salaries in most institutions.
Especially when you're looking at degree level. To be a
Yes.
faculty member, you have to have a graduate degree. I can practice as a registered nurse with an associate degree and make more money than a graduate prepared faculty member.
Exactly. Good point.
Who lobbies for the IHL or things like that?
We do. I do.
You're the lobbyist?
No, well, Kim. Yeah.
Other questions?
I will just commend Dr. Temple. It was a very challenging year as far as nurse faculty salaries go and faculty retention and recruitment. And she was a champion for that. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And we also appreciate you and the unique perspective you bring to us. Some of y'all don't, Dr. Temple was an associate degree director before she assumed her current role. So the experiential knowledge she brings with her is just tremendous. So as a nurse educator, I am very grateful for all you do and the insight you bring to this board and your wisdom and discernment over these last few years. So thank you, Dr. Temple. It is noted and appreciated.
Thank you.
Others from the public?
This is Teresa Malone. May I say a few words, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Teresa Malone, Mississippi Nurses Association. First of all, I would like to express our appreciation to Dr. Rebecca Cagle for presenting at our virtual APRN conference. She was gracious enough to provide a live virtual presentation. And I think one of the best aspects of that particular presentation is that it allowed a lot of our attendees to pose questions, and she was able to respond to those on the spot. There were some follow-up questions that were submitted, and she was so kind to address those as well. So thank you so much to her for presenting. I would also like to express our appreciation to the nurses that have been working with us on a couple of initiatives. One is expanding the information disseminated to nurses regarding fentanyl, the new drug that is, I hate to say on its way, but on its way, tranq, making sure that nurses are aware of those, especially our ER nurses and some of our clinics as well. I would also like to express our appreciation to those that have been working with us on human trafficking, making sure that information is being disseminated. Some have actually helped in posting information in restrooms where those individuals who might be in a potentially human traffic situation would hopefully have access to a number and be able to at least make a call and obtain some information. But we have several initiatives underway. There will be more information being disseminated on that in the very near future. We also have several upcoming meetings that I would like to remind everyone about and encourage you to attend. We are working with the Mississippi Nurses Foundation. I want to express our appreciation to them to sponsor some events throughout the state. Our next one will be in Starkville, Mississippi on June the 27th. It will be Clinical and Social Challenges, the Influence on Nurses and Patients. As all of you know, social media is becoming one of the most influential aspects of nursing, as well as its relation to patients, suicide, anxiety, the list goes on. And so it's very important that we provide information to our nurses to address some of that. Likewise, we are very aware of the mental health crisis in Mississippi, and we will be hosting a PMHMP certification review course on June the 29th and 30th, with the hopes of having more PMHMPs in our state, but more importantly, more remain in our state. I would like to address just a moment some of the discussion regarding the faculty salaries. Just as a reminder, last year, the deans and directors, in conjunction with the Mississippi Nurses Association, did provide an infographic to the legislators that was discussed in depth, and we also included that during our time at the Capitol. So they do have information on that. We have continued those discussions with them as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Malone. Others from the public? Legislative update?
There is no legislative update for today. Mr. Bobinger will be here in July to provide any additional information on legislative issues.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Office of Nurse and Workforce. You have the report.
I'm Lauren Terry, the Director of the Office of Nursing Workforce, and so I will be doing our update. I'll begin with our scholarship programs. As y'all may know, we have Office of Nursing Workforce Student Retention Program, as well as our scholarship program with the collaboration with the Schools of Nursing. With our retention program, we had a fund of $100,000 and we were able to benefit 24 recipients. Of those 24, 9 have completed their studies and graduated. 7 graduated in December of 22 and 2 graduated in May of 23. The other 15 are slated to graduate between August of 23 and December of 24. With this retention scholarship, of course, there are stipulations. My office is responsible for following up with these recipients. They are required to submit to us their transcript upon graduation. They're required to let us know if they have passed boards, as well as employer verification. This all must be done within a year of graduation. Also, with employer verification, they must every 6 months submit to us a new verification. This lets us know that they are still working in the state of Mississippi. Of course, this contract can last from 1 to 2 years. It's just dependent upon if the amount of funds they received. And then with our scholarship that we collaborate with the schools of nursing, the legislator funded us with $800,012,500. Of that amount, we were able to benefit 1,116 students last year. And then to break it down a little bit more, 18% were LPN students, 67% were RN students, and 15% were advanced degree seeking students. In the February board meeting, there was concerns regarding retention if we were able to track those students, as well as concerns about recipient selection. So during our May advisory council meeting, we brought those concerns to the council. And so there was various opinions about what we should do. Should we bring a retention clause to our scholarship? And what we found out is that because the schools have autonomy as far as dispersing the funds, some schools like to disperse the funds among all the students. So some students may get $100 each, and then some schools have a larger amount. So we really didn't know about adding a retention clause to students who may have only received $100. So one of our council members presented using a postgraduate survey. So with this survey, each recipient upon graduation would be required to complete this survey. This survey would have information regarding their plans after graduation, if they plan to stay in state, if they plan to leave the state. They would have to indicate their area of practice, where they plan to practice, and if they plan to do continuing education. And so although it did not have a retention clause, we would be able to track these students. We would be able to know how many students are still working in the state, what area of practice, what area of the state. And that was the solution that our council came up with. And the other concern was the concern with recipient selection. Again, the schools have autonomy to choose who they want. However, we have decided to add where the schools must indicate the recipient how they selected it. So if the recipient was selected based on academic merit, they must note that. If the recipient was selected on financial need, they must note that too. So that way we'll be able to know that these recipients were selected based on what need. And then moving along to our USDA grant. This is our distance learning and telemedicine grant. Our last board meeting, we were in the middle of the shipment phase. So now we're in the installation phase. And so far, there have been 3 partners that have had their installations, the Board of Nursing, Jones College, and Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College. It is our goal to have these installations throughout the summer and to have it completed toward the end of the summer going into the fall. And once the installations are complete, then we'll be able to start the training phase. And so hopefully, once we get this training in, we can get the ball running, be able to use this equipment. And then as far as outreach, myself, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Burks, Ms. Montgomery, and Ms. Jan Collins, we were able to meet with Ryan Miller of Accelerate Mississippi. We met just to talk about the nursing workforce and bringing nurses to the table and talking how as a state, how nursing and our workforce can be improved. So I thank Ms. Collins for bringing us aboard on that meeting. And then lastly, our advisory council, we met in March and we had 4 members that would be rolling off. one member unfortunately passed away in August of 22, and then we had three committee members whose terms were up. And so we did put out that we will be taking applications, received applications. We have chosen 4 members, and Ms. Culpepper would do a motion for the end for those new members. And then we also have plaques for our members that would be rolling off. And so at the conclusion of the meeting, please just take a look. They were unfortunately unable to make it to our meeting today, but just take a look at those plaques. They will be given to those members. And then lastly, just a quick update on MNVP. We have 40 participants. 19 belong to Sharon in her case, 21 are for Casey. We've had no graduations in April. We've had 3 referrals to legal, 3 potential participants, and myself and Casey Loper had the pleasure of attending the NOAP conference in Orlando, Florida this past May. And then Casey had the pleasure of speaking at Holmes Community College actually this week, and she plans to speak at Northwest Community College next month. And that concludes my report, and I will be happy to take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hard to be so chatty today. Okay, the Office of Nursing Workforce, are y'all prohibited from giving scholarships to the nurse educators?
No, ma'am. Actually, the scholarships, they benefit RNs, LPNs, advanced degree seekers, which includes the nurse educators. It's just kind of a big pool of who the scholarship benefits, but it's not, we don't exclude them at all.
So if people wanted to supplement their salaries as a nurse educator, you could apply for a grant. Do that, aren't you?
Yeah, I was talking, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood.
Actual nurse educators are in that position.
Oh, no, as far as my knowledge, I don't believe that that's a part the funds can be used for it.
You couldn't do that. You couldn't use the money towards giving grants to them to supplement their salaries.
The
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I was just thinking that was a thought,
Maybe that can be your philanthropy, Jane.
Very good report.
Thank you.
So from that report as stated. I'll make a motion by Jeremy,
Second.
second by
Lacy.
Lacy. All in favor? Any opposed? Practical nursing education report, Dr. Burks.
Morning.
Morning.
I have 2 items to bring before the board today for consideration. The first being from North Mississippi Medical Center in Tupelo. They submitted a proposal request to teach the 80-hour IV therapy expanded role. They do have a course coordinator, and that is Dr. Emily Edwards. They vetted their instructors as well as clinical preceptors if they are given the opportunity to have this program. They are utilizing the curriculum as outlined by the Community College Board, and their anticipated start date is July 31st, 2023. And their rationale for this is due to the influx of LPNs, and they're utilizing more LPNs in their facilities. And so with that, in that expanded role, it allows them to utilize them to their fullest and maximum potential. My recommendation is North Mississippi Medical Center, they be allowed to offer the 80-hour course. And in doing so, and prior to, they would have to meet with myself so that we can discuss and review the curriculum, the course outline, expectations, and et cetera. In addition, they would also be required to provide an annual report regarding their program outcomes, and that will be due yearly, October the 15th. The second item that I have is in regard to a creation of a delineation course for IV therapy for the expanded role of licensed practical nurses. In the Administrative Code, Part 2830, Rule 2.4, the scope of practice, it explains and it talks about the endorsement license for LPNs, that those who have completed an IV therapy integrated accredited nursing program in another jurisdiction, they must complete a board-approved IV therapy delineation course before performing acts of IV therapy. Currently, LPNs request an endorsement they are taking the standardized of the common IV therapy course, which is 80 hours. So a part of this recommendation is a delineation course has been created. And if you look in your packet, you will see an overview of the course that has been created. And instead of a 40-hour course, an 80-hour course, this will be a 20-hour course. And the 20 hours, it comes from the research and reaching out to other boards of nursing who also do something very similar in delineation courses. And the objectives, they are not different. They are from the Community College Board, the curriculum. The major part and component of this delineation course is in regards to the legal aspects and practice of IV therapy. It includes an extensive discussion of the Mississippi Board of Nursing with the Mississippi Nurse Practice Act, as well as their scope of practice. As you can see in the outline, it talks about the review of concepts for anatomy and physiology and review of concepts of fluid and electrolytes. Currently, in the 80-hour course, this is detailed information, and by itself, these two topic areas are 20 hours. And then it contains the information that is equivalent to what's in the 80-hour in terms of the equipment and procedure, complications, medication. And these individuals will also have to still do a performance checklist that includes a checkoff. So my recommendation is that the delineation course be adopted for use by accredited nursing programs and agencies, approved to offer the standalone course. There will be no changes in the criteria for faculty, clinical preceptors, and coordinators in using the delineation course. And also the programs will still be responsible for providing the Board of Nursing with the proper paperwork as proof of the licensee's successful completion of the delineation course. And that is the end of my proposals. And I'll take any questions you all may have.
Dr. Burks, on the delineation course, is there a research period, or is it once you're certified, you're certified?
Once you're certified, with the exception of, it's just like in the law, if they've been out of practice, then those criteria will go into effect if they have not practiced at all. But once they're certified, they're certified.
And there are no CEUs to maintain that certification.
Correct. There's no CEUs.
I just have a quick question too. So the delineation course, basically you're proposing something that's abbreviated for people that have gone through the 80-hour course or something similar
In another jurisdiction,
in another jurisdiction. So instead of making them repeat
everything.
you've condensed it. So I assume you condensed it based on, this is your work, right?
Yes.
So who's going to do these checkoffs?
Currently, the delineation, well, the 80-hour course is, there are certain schools that teach the standalone. Now, all of the programs, the community colleges that have practical nursing programs, IV therapy is integrated. But the 80-hour standalone, not all the schools teach that. So those who teach that 80-hour standalone, they are teaching or can teach the delineation.
Okay.
And with that, they are responsible for those checkoffs.
I was gonna say, that would be fun, but you'd be extra busy. I think we give you enough to do, but thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Burks? All right, so she's bringing two items to us.
We accept both. Would you both?
Yes,
I move that we accept both recommendations as presented.
Dr. Mary Stewart, I'll second it. Jeremy, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you all.
Moving on to board business. In your packet, you have the business meeting minutes for April the 14th, 2023. I need to get a motion to approve those. I move that we approve. A motion by Jeremy Cohen,
I'll second.
second by Laura Moore. All in favor? Any opposed? Also in your packet, you have the special call meeting minutes for April 21st, 2023. Need a motion. I move that we approve those minutes. Motion by Jeremy, Second by Laura Moore. All in favor? Any opposed? Agreed settlement proposal minutes, April 2023. Need to get a motion to approve those. Make a motion, Ms. Nancy Norris. Second. And a second by Jeremy. All in favor? Any opposed? Waive reading of names on motions. I'll make that motion. Second by Jeremy. All in favor? Any opposed? Future meetings, administrative hearings and settlements are set for July 17th through the 20th, 2023, starting at 8:30 a.m. Business meeting will be July 21st, 2023 at 11:05. And that panel will be Sandra Culpepper, Nancy Johnson, Janie Clanton, and we are still in need of an advanced practice coverage there. So we'll work on that and get that done ASAP, Dr. Johnson. Executive Director's report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My report is brief this morning. Couple of things I want to bring to your attention. First, I'd like to introduce that we do have a guest visiting the Mississippi Board of Nursing from the great state of Oklahoma, Dr. Jenny Barnhouse. If Jenny would please stand and be recognized. Jenny is the executive officer for the Oklahoma Board of Nursing. She also is my mentee. I serve as her mentor. NCSBN assigns mentors to new EOs. She's not new to the profession. She's just new to her position. She had worked at the Board of Nursing and was fortunate enough to be selected to serve as the EO. And as such, she visited us this week to see what we do here in Mississippi at the Board of Nursing, and hopefully it has contributed as well as received some insight that she can take back to Oklahoma. And so a point of personal preference, Mr. Chairman, if Jenny would like to say anything at this point.
I love Mississippi. Thank you for the invite.
Okay, so we've been excited by having her here, and it has been a great experience for the staff as well as board members. I'd like to begin by thanking my staff and the board members for your support. I have a phenomenal staff. They do an outstanding job, as you can tell from the report that was given by Ms. Terry this morning, Dr. Burks. And just like to recognize the legal department for the outstanding job, staff, all the staff involved with our hearings this week. They did a tremendous job this week. And so I'd just like to salute legal, and that's Deanne and Brandon in their job that they did, as well as the legal compliance staff and all the staff that were involved in our hearing cycle this week.
Thank you.
So moving forward, the NCSBN annual meeting is scheduled for August 16th through 18th, 2023 in Chicago. As you are aware, this is the 45th anniversary annual meeting for National Council of State Boards of Nursing, and it's sort of kind of a big deal. I would like to thank our board members that have volunteered, as well as the staff, to serve as delegates at Delegate Assembly. This is also a major business meeting for NCSBN. And the individuals that have volunteered graciously to serve in the capacity of delegates to represent the state of Mississippi are Dr. Priscilla Burks, will be the RN delegate. Ms. Janie Clanton, board member, will be the alternate RN delegate. Mr. Jeremy Cummins will be the PN delegate, and Ms. Sandra Culpepper will serve as the alternate PN delegate during the business session. So I thank you all for volunteering and stepping up to fulfill that function, because it is a very important position when we talk about and deal with the business of the National Council and all of regulatory nursing. In addition, the NCSBN, and you should have received an email from me about committee participation at the NCSBN level. And so if you did not receive that email, please let me know. There are committee positions out there. The NCSBN is looking for individuals to serve in certain capacities. And I highly encourage you to participate, sign up. Those committees are vetted at the national level. And it is a great experience if you're selected to serve and contribute your expertise to NCSBN at the national level. Additionally, they have sent me an email about volunteers to also serve at the annual meeting. And it is also another great experience for exposure, to be able to network, to serve as a volunteer during the delegate assembly. And so I will forward that information to you. And if you're interested, please contact the individuals that are listed on the email, because they have sent it out more than once. So I think they're having a problem finding volunteers to serve at the annual meeting.
Bill, what capacities are those?
There are different ones. Some is the voting process when they vote to be on the election committee, and you volunteer to go and count the votes and serve in that capacity. I think Mr. Chairman volunteered 1 year, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember which committee you were on, and he had to go up and read off something at the beginning of the credentialing. I think you were on the credentialing committee. So it's things like that that you just have to report to the chairperson of that committee. They'll give you an assignment, and you just carry out that assignment for that day during the delegate assembly. Some are a little bit more involved than others. I think Shannon participated once on the election committee and annual meeting. And so that's a little bit more involved, especially if you have a big election going on, and making sure that the votes are tallied, that you're meeting with the parliamentarian and all of that kind of stuff. But it's doable. It's very doable. And again, it's a great experience. Additionally, we received an email, as a matter of fact, this morning from the governor's office on the OLRC. The OLRC will meet next Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, at the Phillips Building at 2 o'clock. And 2 of our rules and regulations will be brought forward for discussion and hopefully approval. And that's the MMVP rule and the Fresh Start Act. Is that correct, Deanne? The Fresh Start Act. The revisions are what we had submitted for the Fresh Start Act. And they did recognize it was short notice, but that's the day that all 3 of the people that need to serve on that committee will be available. And that's the governor, secretary of state, and the AG. So we look forward to that, and hopefully we'll have some finalization of at least those 2 rules next week. But I did want to make you aware of it in case you're interested in attending. I know it's short notice, but you're always open to attend when we are presenting our rules and regulations at OLRC. You can also see that we have been very visible. Some of the things have been mentioned. I know Lauren mentioned, Ms. Terry mentioned about the NOAP. We had several staff members to attend that. It's a very important event. And I just want to follow up by saying that Dr. Burks also presented the Mississippi School Nurse Conference. We were invited to participate in that conference for the first time that I'm aware of from the School Nurse Association. And indeed, from what I've heard about what took place at the conference, it was very well received. You talk about misinformation. Dr. Burks cleared up the misinformation. And that's what conferences are for. We answered their questions, and they thought they were regulated one way by us and realized that they were regulated by more than us. So it was an enlightening experience for them, and I think it will make our ability to network and participate with the school nurses and the Mississippi Department of Education, and make sure that their standards are protecting the public. And at this point, I think that may be all that I have to present. Just let me know, or let Ms. Gray know, the executive assistant, those that will be attending annual meeting. If you have any issues, all of your accommodations and registration should be taken care of at this point. And if not, please let her know so that we can finalize those issues. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Make a motion to accept the executive director's report.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Committee reports, executive committee. I have nothing to bring forward this morning.
The compliance committee has 3 motions to bring forward today. The first motion is I move that the board adopt the compliance committee's recommendation that the following affidavit, formal reprimand, be accepted for ratification. License R 880149.
Second motion.
the board adopt the compliance committee's recommendation and approve an extension of 180 calendar days, with preconditions of license R903852 to allow more time to complete the board approved assessor's recommendations. Motion 3, move that the board adopt the compliance committee's recommendation to approve extending the suspension of license R854976 to allow for completion of the IFB and associated assessor.
I have a motion by Ms. Moore. Second by Jane. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Advanced Practice Committee.
Nothing to bring forward at this time.
Practice Committee, Dr. Stewart.
We have no motions, but I want to just take a second to say, and I know that Dr. Johnson is so good about praising the staff, but I've been working on that committee for 2 or 3 years now. And Talisha Greenlaw, there are other staff members that are part of that and they do a great job. But she is remarkable and she makes it so easy for us to handle the business efficiently and accurately. And I just wanted to go on record to say that the committee appreciates her efforts. She is constant and really very good.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. I believe that deserves a round of applause. Administrative Code Committee. Anything to bring forward there. Finance Committee, Jeremy.
All right, you all should have your budget analysis and your financials in your packet. The report seems somewhat redundant, which that's a very good thing. We like for things to stay on an even steady keel. And no surprises, and that's where we are now. As far as expenditures, individual line expenditures are higher. We've been reporting that throughout this fiscal year. Salary expenses are a little bit higher due to the implementation of the CEC2 salary increases, and that affecting the majority of the staff here at Board of Nursing. Compared to fiscal year 22, travel is up about 60,000 this year compared to last year. Now that's going to be because of COVID restrictions. There was a lot less travel. Also, the legislation lifted the requirement for Trip Optimizer, and the mileage rate increased from 0.585 cents per mile to 0.655 cents per mile. So that all goes into consideration when looking at the increase there. It still keeps us within our range. Routine commodities expenses were a little bit higher. There was some new furniture purchased for the Board of Nursing, as well as office and IT equipment for the agency. So those commodity expenses were higher due to that. While there's an increase in expenses, the percentage of budget to expense is somewhat similar to the prior 2 years. We have expended or obligated about 77.2% of this year's budget. Now, fiscal year ends June 30th, so we're in a really good place there. When we start looking at May and June's expenditures, we'll probably be up somewhere around 92 to 95%. We want to be as close to 100% as we can be. We want to obligate our budget, but there won't be an overage. And so that's the good thing here. So end of year, and we'll have that report, I assume, probably in July. End of year, we'll probably be sitting around 92 to 95% of the expended budget. As far as budget issues, we continue to monitor all categories, making sure monies are moved as needed. Our fiscal year 24 appropriations was a little lower than what was requested. That was due to 2 part-time positions being dissolved. They were both set with a very low salary range of around 15,000. It was impossible to hire at those. So the legislature dissolved those 2 positions that we were unable to fill. So that's the reason the appropriations were a little less. As far as revenue, fiscal year 23, year-to-date collected has been 6.9 million. Collected in April was $134,120. April shows an increase of about 7,300 compared to last fiscal year. And that would be due to increased renewal fees and examination fees. They were higher for April in this fiscal year. If we look at a true revenue comparison, we will look at fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 21, because that would be pre-COVID. And so when we look at those two, we're actually about 4% in the better than what we were fiscal year 21 at the same time. So overall, our financials for the Board of Nursing is in good shape. Currently, we have over 8.2 million in available cash. That's sufficient to meet the needs for the next 2-year cycle. Now, be reminded that in December, we had the RN renewal, which is a lot more cash influx than we do in our odd number years, or even number fiscal years, for LPN renewals. So it'll be a lot less. So that money will kind of carry through a 2-year period there, sitting at $8,016,411 in the bank right now. I want to commend Shan Montgomery. She does a phenomenal job. You know, as I was telling the executive committee this morning, she's kind of like a magician when it comes to analyzing and dealing with these numbers. She keeps it so transparent for us. And so I want to give her all the credit. And thank you very much, Shan, for all you do. Open any questions if there are any.
Questions for Jamie? Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Shannon. So, Finance Committee report. I get a motion to accept that report.
I'll make that motion.
And a motion by Ms. Culpepper.
I'll second.
Thank you, by Ms. Jan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Office of Nursing Workforce. Advisory.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so what we do have coming out of the ONW committee, we would like to bring forward a motion to approve the 4 nominated people to the ONW Advisory Committee. If you notice, you all have a manila packet there, and it has 4 different persons in there, and it gives you all their information, such as their credentials, what they do, and would you want to look over those? We have Dr. Alicia Newman. She is currently a dean at William Carey University in and she lives in Hattiesburg. We have Dr. Alice Austin. She's the program chair at Kings Community College and resides in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Mary Collins, CRNA. She is the assistant program director and nurse anesthesia program at the University of Southern Mississippi. She resides in Meridian. And then you have Dr. Bianca Bully Thompson. She currently works for the VA as the staff nurse practitioner for inpatient infectious diseases and resides in Byram, Mississippi. Does anyone have any questions?
Just real quick, so first, thank you, and I did look through those. So are there parameters, like, I assume you guys are trying to fill maybe perhaps slots for representation around the state or people in different roles? And I may supposed to know that, but I don't know.
That is the intention, is to find different areas because we want to make sure that we're addressing all areas of nursing. And so that's why you see, and I spoke to the fact of their locations, what their job descriptions were, because we want to be very clear that we're trying to reach every area of nursing.
Did we have a lot of applications? Just curious.
Only 11.
We had 11, and these are done by nomination by coworkers
Others.
usually.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a specific makeup? I know Dr. Stewart was alluding to that, but like the nurse educators on the board and all that, are there nurse administrators, nurse executives, nurse faculty? Is there
There's no set designation, but when Ms. Terry and I discussed them, we want a wide variety of people at the table so that we can make sure that everybody's being serviced. Perfect. Thank you. You're welcome.
Other questions?
Make the motion, we accept these nominations. Have a motion?
I'll second.
Second, Laura. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Culpepper. And I believe Dr. Johnson covered the annual meeting that's upcoming August 16th through 18th. and our delegates as well and alternates. So the next and last item of business today, as you guys know, is June, so it's our annual meeting.
There's not a motion on there to accept the names of the delegates. Can I get you to make that motion?
Be happy
Sir.
to. Do we get a motion?
The delegates that have volunteered and are listed on the agenda.
A second.
Got a motion by Dr. Stewart, second by Nancy Norris Johnson. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. All right, again, today we're in the month of June, which is our annual meeting. We have this last item, and we need to move through the process of election of board officers. At this time, I would like to hand over to the chairman of the committee, which is Miss Lacy Gentry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have the ballots here. I believe if you'll assist me, TJ, the policy and procedure, do you have it
Yes.
there? I don't have a copy. Apologies.
That's okay. Also, before ballot, we do have there is in the process, ability for open to be able to, for a floor nomination of any of the positions.
Okay, so at this time, do we need to take any additional nominations to the ballot as it stands? I will read the ballot. Currently, the ballot as it stands, president nominee is Sandra Culpepper, vice president nominee is Laura Moore, secretary nominee is Janie Clanton, and treasurer nominee is Jeremy Cummins. So with that, so the rules contained in the current election of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised shall govern the board in all cases to which they are applicable and which they are not inconsistent with these bylaws, the Mississippi Code, or any special rules of order of the board may adopt. I am the chairman of the nominating committee, and I have presented the nominees as they currently stand. This is the slate as it has been read. And moving forward, for president, currently Sandra Culpepper is nominated. Are there further nominations from the floor?
I'd like to nominate Dr. Mary Stewart.
Dr. Mary Stewart, thank you very much.
Dr. Stewart, would you accept that nomination?
Good, thank you.
Any other nominations for president? Seeing none, the nominations for president are closed. For vice president, Laura Moore is nominated. Are there further nominations from the floor? Seeing none, the nominations for vice president are closed. For treasurer, Janie Clanton is nominated. Are there further nominations from the floor?
Secretary.
For treasurer, my apologies. My esteemed colleague Jeremy Cummins is nominated. Are there any further nominations from the floor? Seeing none, the nominations for treasurer are closed. For secretary, Janie Clanton is nominated. Are there further nominations from the floor at this time? Seeing none, the nominations for secretary are closed. Should a nomination be received for an office that has no opposing candidate, that election can be held by voice vote. Should a nomination be received for an office with a candidate, a ballot election must then be held for that office. So we.
We have to redo the ballot to add the name of the individual that's been added from the floor.
So at this time, could we call a 5-minute recess or something? That'd be okay if we, all right. This time I'd like to make a motion to call a recess. We reprint the ballots.
Second.
All right, 5-minute recess. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did. Jen did on something.
I did at some point.
You did earlier.
I did Shan's budget.
No, I just. Oh, y'all are my bad.
Yeah.
So by the time I look around.
Are you good over there, ma'am?
So, I mean, do you not sit there? Should she not sit like that? Okay.
So you did. What does that box look like it's on fire? I'm not wearing my glasses. Oh, look, you kind of take your glasses off and look at it. What does it look like?
It looks like it's on fire with the little triangle there.
Well, say, why is it that box look like it's on fire? Bring me up today.
I mean, he just.
For a minute there, hold on. I don't blame him. I would, at his age, I know, ran up out of here. I would have been like, I gotta go. Yeah. Yes, yeah. You know why? Yeah, really.
believe the ballots have been reprinted and Lacey is distributing those. If you would, and they will be picked back up and by the committee, which is, let me name the committee and be on record with who our committee is, which is Nancy Northcott, Lacey Gentry, and Miss Jan Collins.
And we will be accompanied by Ms. Shan Montgomery on counting the votes. Return in just a few minutes. You ready? Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, pen. Now, our name is in you.
Kristen, are y'all gonna recess? Yeah.
And we'll take a brief 5-minute recess while they count. you guys don't mind, I would like to go around the room and state your name and position. That way we do have that on record before we read the election results. We'll start with Ms. Nancy.
Nancy Norris Johnson, board member.
Mary Stewart, RN member.
Laura Moore, APRN, board member.
Danny Clanton, RN secretary board.
Sandra Culpepper, LPN Vice President.
TJ Adams, Dorian.
Jeremy Cummins, LPN, Treasurer of the Board.
Lacey Gentry, RN.
Carly Walker, LPN.
Jan Collins, consumer member.
All right. Well, Lacey.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. President, the election of officers for the Mississippi Board of Nursing 2023, 2024. Treasurer Jeremy Cummins, Secretary Janie Clanton, Vice President Laura Moore, President Sandra Culpepper.
So at this time, I'd like to say congratulations to all of us. Thank you, Shan, for helping us run through the process. We changed things up this year, but I think it is for the better. And I would also like to say, as I conclude my 1 year of service, it's been an honor and a pleasure to be the board president for the last year. We have a fabulous group of board members and staff here in Mississippi, and I would say it rivals anywhere in the country, if not better than anywhere in the country. So again, it's been an honor and a privilege. And we have Oklahoma second to that. So but an honor and a privilege. And I am fortunate to work with each of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And last, I would like to say, concluding this election, so with if there is a challenge to the election procedure or outcome, it must be made during the election meeting, which is now. So if there is a challenge, let it be known. If not, the results stand. All right, with that, make a motion, we adjourn. Motion.
Oh. I'm second.
Reverse. All right, we back it up. We got a motion by Ms. Shan and a second by Mr. Cummins. All in favor?
Just take her, John.
We'll call this appeal to order. I am Kristen Love, and I will serve as the hearing officer in this matter today. My role during the course of this proceeding be to see to the orderly process of the proceedings and to ensure the proceedings are conducted in accordance with the applicable law and rules. At this time, I'll ask the members of the board to introduce themselves for the record.
Mary Stewart, RN. Laura Moore, APRN. Janie Clanton, RN.
Sandra Culpepper, LPN.
TJ Adams, RN.
Jeremy Cummins, LPN.
Carly Walker, LPM. And I think I'm gonna be excused.
We have to have.
It's seven. We're good. We're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
You're welcome. Will the attorney representing the board state your name for the record?
Brandon Walker.
And is the appellant present?
Yes,
And is the appellant represented by counsel?
yes. Attorney Valerie Dorsey.
At this time, I'll just sort of walk you through what the appeal process will look like. Appeals of a decision of the board hearing panel must be heard before a quorum of the full membership of the board. That quorum is noted. The appeals are limited to the record before the board hearing panel. The this board here, the full membership of the board present today cannot retry the appealed case. Arguments shall be directed solely to the issues from the record of the transcript. It shall not include any new evidence, testimony, or witnesses. The appellant and the appellee each will be allotted 20 minutes to present arguments on why the decision of the board hearing panel should be overturned or affirmed. The appellant may reserve a portion of her allotted time for rebuttal. Neither one of the parties will be allowed to read at length from the briefs or records. And this board may ask either party questions, but solely related to the issues identified in the appeal. And understand that no member of the board that was on the board hearing panel is participating today. At this time, I'll allow for the appellant to proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Valerie Dorsey and I represent Lakeisha Estrix, and we are appealing the decision of the panel to mainly restrict the license of the appellant Lakeisha Estrix. There's a complaint that was filed against her, and this complaint was filed May of 2022. And it is based on allegations that allegedly occurred in April of 2017. For some unknown reason, it took 5 years to bring this complaint against Ms. Estrich, although the allegations were made to the Board of Nursing in 2017. This complaint that we have before us that's in the record is simple. It is a 2-page complaint. The first thing it says is that she works for Humana. The second thing it says is that she documented visits to a member's home postmortem. There's nothing else in that complaint. This is the only thing that Ms. Estrich was put on notice of, was these 2 things. And so what we gather from this complaint is you're saying, number one, she was working for an agency, and when she worked for that agency, she documented visits to a member's home that was deceased. When this was brought before the panel, the sole testimony was that of the investigator, Karen James. And what Mr. James said was that she basically worked at Humana and that this member was deceased, and that she documented visits to his home, and that there was no way that she could have visited his home because he was deceased. Mr. James was asked, and he testified that he did not interview anyone else. He did not interview the member's family. He did not talk to anyone else. He simply pulled records from Humana, and that was the basis of his investigation of this case that had been going on for 5 years. When Ms. Estridge testified at the hearing, she testified that number one, she never worked for Humana. That was completely false. Number two, she did actually make visits to the member's home. As a part of this program, the people that were a part of this program were not looked at as patients, they were looked at as members. She was hired as a care manager, and in her job as a care manager, she stated that LPN was preferred but not required. She was not allowed to give any kind of medications. She was not allowed to even identify herself as a nurse to the members that she visited. She testified that not only was the deceased person a member, his wife was also a member. So that when she visited this home, she was visiting not only him, but his wife. She also testified, and this is in the transcript, that she was required to use the Centrex system, that she was required to call, and those calls came from inside the member's home. And so once that information was brought out, it appears based on the record that the allegations changed, because based on her testimony, based on her jobs, based on the log sheet, she did actually visit the member. According to her testimony, her job allowed her to speak with other family members, and that was allowable to be documented as a visit. And if you look at the log sheet that is actually in the appeal brief, if you look at the dates that are listed, those dates that are in question, it is clear that yes, she said she visited the member, but no, she never said she spoke with the member. And so our main issue is that once the allegation that was made in the complaint was proved to be false, number one, that she did not work for Humana. Number two, that she did actually visit the member's home, and that's not disputed based on what I see. Then there was the issue of the method and manner in which she documented the visits by saying that she stated that she educated the member and she did not educate the member. But according to Ms. Estridge, her job allowed her to do that, and that's why on the sheet itself that shows the entries from the dates that she visited, there's a clear distinction as to whether she actually visited and whether she spoke to the member. At no point post-mortem did she document that she spoke to the member. She also stated that the wife, who is also a member, was the main point of contact, that there were times more than this that she went to the home and that she was unable to see the deceased member, but that she was allowed to communicate to the wife to make sure that everyone was okay and that she, did her job as a care manager. And basically, what we're saying is that she did not falsely put in the record or in the member's record that she did not visit that member. She stated that she visited, but she did not speak to him. And that's what her job allowed her to do. And the investigator, who was the main witness for the board, did not take the time in 5 years to contact her boss to see what she was allowed and was not allowed to do. He testified at one point that she used the computer system to put in entries to determine when she visited the residence and did not. And that was not true, because she actually used the call-in method to verify that she was actually at that location. There has to be substantial evidence that Ms. Estridge committed the acts that's presented in this complaint. We have an investigation that took 5 years and we didn't even know who she worked for. We have an investigation that went on 5 years and the investigator never thought to talk to the deceased member's wife to actually verify that she was at this residence. None of that occurred. He never talked to her actual manager he didn't know any information about the method in which she logged her visits and the method in which she actually verified that she was there. And so what we're saying today is that based on her job as a care manager, based on what she was allowed to do in that role, based on the reporting that she was allowed to make, which clearly makes a distinguishment as to whether she visited or spoke to the member, that there was nothing false in what was in the documents. She also testified importantly that she put her information into a system for Affinity, which is who she worked for. And she testified that they in turn sent that information to Humana. She did not directly submit anything to Humana. So our position is, here's what the allegation was. She clearly proved that she did visit the residence. She was not being untruthful about that. She did not work for Humana. And although, which I can see how the board sees that this was probably not the proper way to handle business, this is what her company allowed her to do. These sheets were the sheets that she reported on. And based on what she was hired to do as a care manager, she did that, and that she did not falsify documents going to the patient's residence postmortem. She was there. She did not know he was deceased. She was not required to physically lay eyes on him in order to actually do the job that was required of her by Affinity. Thank you. And I'll reserve time for any rebuttal.
Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. This is a really simple matter. The appellant was documenting visits on someone that was dead. And she admits to documenting visits as you've just heard. This code annotated 73-15-31-9 provides that the right to appeal from the action of the hearing panel to the full membership of the board. Today, Ms. Estrus is appealing the decision of the board panel to issue discipline on her license. As I've already stated, the appeals are limited to the transcript and to the record, and no new evidence can be admitted. And today, the appellant argues credible evidence, as she stated in her brief, and that credible evidence didn't exist to support the charged violation in the complaint. And I'm gonna go ahead and point out now that the complaint clearly states, if you look at it, it says, in 2017, respondent documented visits to clients. Respondent documented multiple visits to a client post-mortem. I think that clearly states it was to a client. A complaint was issued on May 5th, this complaint, 2022, charging an appellant with a violation of 73-15-29-1G, and that the appellant falsified or in a repeatedly negligent manner made incorrect entries or failed to make essential entries on records. The complaint notice was mailed via certified mail. Service of process was perfected. On June 8th, she appeared at that hearing. There were exhibits that were presented showing 4 documented visits, falsely documented visits to a patient or member after the death of that member. There was much discussion on whether this person was considered a member or a patient. These exhibits included assessments that were performed on the deceased member. After deliberation, the panel rendered discipline. From what I understand, the appellant has completed some of that discipline. There were classes, and it's all on the record. A part of that, she was also issued with 12 months of essentially probation or restrictions on her license. And the final order of that was mailed August 23rd, 2022. And on or about September 19th, 22, the appellant perfected her appeal. Now, as I stated earlier, the appellant alleges that the board did not meet its burden of proof, which is clear and convincing evidence. In administrative proceedings against professional licensed by the state, the disciplinary board or agency is charged to demand clear and convincing evidence of the offense. Although the accusing party must prove its case by clear and convincing evidence before the disciplinary board, the disciplinary agency's decision is insulated from judicial disturbance where it's supported by substantial evidence and is neither arbitrary nor capricious. Substantial evidence is something less than a preponderance of the evidence, but more than a scintilla or glimmer. And this is from the Mississippi Court of Appeals. The judicial eye looks to see whether a fair-minded fact finder might have found evidence clear and convincing that the offense had occurred, and where that may be said, it will not disturb the board's judgment. The appellant incorrectly points out in her brief that there was no credible evidence to support the charge against the appellant. And unfortunately, that's not a basis for which an appellant is allowed to appeal, as I've already mentioned. An appeal may be made for lack of substantial evidence. And one thing I want to point out that was argued by the appellant is that the panel could not have possibly reached its conclusion based on the evidence at the hearing. And to me, that implies that the decision the panel meets was merely just an impossibility. The only requirement the panel had was to find that there was clear and convincing evidence at the hearing that supported the charge falsifying visits. And clear and convincing is a standard, that must be met by the board. At the hearing, the board presented evidence that met clear and convincing standard. For starters, the member's death certificate was admitted and presented. The certificate was dated April 12th, 2017. There was no objection or dispute as to whose name was on that it was the name of the member that was in discussion. That was undisputed. Next, the board presented evidence that showed that falsely documented visits, 4 falsely documented visits to be exact, were allegedly performed by the appellant after the death of the member. Again, the member's death certificate was dated April 12th, 2017. These visits were dated April 13th, 2017, the very next day after the member passed away, April 20th, 2017, April 27th, 2017, and May 4th, 2017. That was undisputed by the appellant that she documented these visits. In fact, the appellant actually admitted at the hearing and today that those assessments and notes were made. Now, what the appellant argues is that they did not falsely document. They've tried to turn this into an argument that she visited the home and that this is an issue of falsely documented visits to the home of the member, not the member itself. The charges against the appellant were never about the visit to the home. As I've already pointed out, these charges were in relation to falsely documented assessments on a member that was deceased. The complaint plainly stated that the appellant documented visits to a client. It did not simply allege that the appellant falsely documented visits to the member's home. Much like the assumption that was made in the brief stating the board panel cannot have possibly reached its conclusion, the appellant cannot have possibly performed an assessment on a deceased person. In the assessments note dated April 13th, 2017, the day after the member passed away, it states, and I quote, "Care management visit made to member's home. Member assessed for wellness and member is compliant. Member educated on disease process and medication uses." I'm gonna read that one more time. Care management visit made to member's home. Member assessed for wellness and member is compliant. Member educated on disease process and medication uses. There's so many issues with that. First, the member was assessed. The dead member was assessed for wellness compliance, wellness of all things that you could be assessed for. And the member was found to be compliant. Now, how in the world a dead person can be compliant with a wellness, I don't understand. Secondly, the appellant states she educated the member. The deceased member was educated on disease process and medication uses. Not really sure how that's possible either. Just as a reminder that the charge against the appellant was in regards to those falsely documented visits, not the visits to the home. And what's most concerning about as the appellant educating a deceased member is the fact that the appellant continually made those visits after the member's death. And then seemed to blame everybody else for her not knowing that member was deceased. I believe in the record in the transcript, it shows first she blamed Humana, and then there was the agency because the appellant, they were left on her list of people to see. And so she continued to make false assessments because they were left on her list. Next, she continued to blame the deceased member's wife for her reason is to keep educating the deceased member. And according to her testimony, the appellant could assess through the member, as you heard a while ago, through the member's wife and never actually see the member. she actually testified, I think, to a couple of times where she said she'd asked things like how the member was, or was everything okay? And that's how the assessment was made. What's interesting is that she said that the death of the member never came up in those conversations. But when you get further in the testimony, she says that these assessments that were done to the wife who she believed to be that was mentally incompetent, and that was actually the reason she was going. So she was going to the home because there were some mental deficiencies there, and she continued to assess who who she believed was the mentally deficient wife. Now, the Mississippi Supreme Court has defined substantial evidence as evidence that a reasonable person would accept as adequate to support a conclusion. The board presented undisputed evidence of the member's death and of dated, falsely documented assessments made by the appellant. The appellant contends that the board did not provide substantial evidence to meet clear and convincing burden. With the evidence presented by the board at the hearing, it would almost be impossible for the panel to reach any other conclusion than the guilty verdict that they rendered. The member passed away on April 12, 2017. That was undisputed. The appellant falsely documented four visits on a deceased member after that date. The assessments notes made on that day was that the member was compliant with a wellness check. The appellant documented that the appellant educated the deceased member on disease process and medication uses. As I said, based on this evidence, it would be unreasonable for the panel to have reached any other conclusion. Therefore, the appellant's claim that the board failed to meet its burden in providing clear and convincing evidence is unfounded and baseless and should be dismissed, and the ruling of the panel should be affirmed. Now, the appellant made a brief mention of a due process argument. And it's important to note that Mississippi courts have routinely held that an administrative agency must afford procedural due process under the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Those two elements of of due process or notice and opportunity to be heard. Both of those were here. She received notice of complaint of the charges. She appeared on her hearing. She had an opportunity to be heard. She also alleges that there was, I believe I quote, what the board sought to do what was akin to amending its complaint mid-hearing. And I believe counsel opposite pointed this out, that during the questioning, the board somehow tried to twist this into or change the charge. The transcript shows no record of that. The site in the brief that points to this, there's a line of questioning that's being done. And to my knowledge, questioning is a matter of fact finding, that there was no motion made to amend the complaint. Questioning and fact finding don't rise to amending complaint. The appellant next argues in her brief that due process was violated because the complaint was filed 5 years after the discussed negligent entries. I've already made note of the two requirements by law for due process, notice and a chance to be heard, and neither of those include a time delay. Further, the Nurse Practice Act does not contain a statute of limitations that bars the board from bringing disciplinary action. For these reasons, the appellant's claim of due process violation are also baseless and unfounded, and the ruling of the panel should be affirmed. The purpose of the Nurse Practice Act is to facilitate public confidence in the practice of nursing and to ensure that the life and health of the public is safeguarded. Findings and conclusions of the board derived from the hearing involving the charges against the appellant should not be disturbed unless they are not supported by substantial evidence, they're arbitrary or capricious, they violate a statutory or constitutional right of the accused, or they're out of scope of authority of the board. The decision of the panel was within the scope of the authority of the board, was supported by substantial evidence. It was not arbitrary or capricious, and the appellant's statutory or constitutional rights were not violated. For these reasons, I respectfully request the decision of the panel be affirmed. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any rebuttal, Ms. Dorsey?
Yes, thank you. The first thing I would like to point out is that the only charge that was made against Ms. Estridge was that she documented visits. There's been a lot of talk about assessments and about what she put in her reports, but she was charged with documenting visits to a client post-mortem that did not occur. And what the board is attempting to do is alter the definition of visit. they're trying to make it seem like the actual visit means what you do when you get there. If you look at the documents that are a part of the record, clearly, yes, she visited. That's true. That was the only thing that she was charged with, was that she that she documented that she visited a client's home postmortem that did not occur. She did visit. Now, she did not state that she spoke with the member. And based on what she was actually charged with, this complaint should not have led to the suspension of her license or the restrictions that were placed on her license. Also, the board speaks of clear and convincing evidence. I understand that that's the standard, but it is almost impossible for something to be clear and convincing when the person presenting that evidence is not credible because they did absolutely no investigation. And that's from the record itself. It's not anything that we're making up. Also, the board speaks of notice. Yes, due process requires notice and opportunity to be heard, but notice is much broader than what Mr. Walker is saying that it's supposed to be. Notice also means that you're supposed to have notice of the allegations against you. The only thing that she received in this complaint is that she documented visits to a client that didn't occur. That's it. She didn't receive anything about the assessments that she made, about the method that she documented. It's just that she documented these visits and these visits did not occur. And when the main witness for the board testified, he testified that there was no way she was at this home because this patient was deceased. That was the only evidence that was presented. If there were other things that the board sought to mention at the hearing, she should have been given notice of those instead of those things being brought up mid-hearing, and instead of the focus being solely on the assessments and not the actual visit itself. So for those reasons, we are asking the board, as we stated in our brief, at minimum to change the ruling or to actually dismiss this complaint against Ms. Estridge. She has already complied, as we stated in our brief, with some of the things because she was trying to make every effort to comply, but she is still asking that these restrictions be lifted and also that this complaint be dismissed.
At this time, I'll allow the board to ask questions of the parties. No questions? Okay.
So, Ms. Esford, were you employed with Affinity
Affinity nurse.
and they were contracted by Humana? Okay, so when you made these visits to the home, I understand that the patient's wife was also a member. But were these visits billed to the specific patients?
The member,
Yes.
I'm not sure how they build it. I just charted the way they taught, Affinity taught me.
So would you chart on the deceased member and the member's wife separately?
It depends on who if possible. If I had met with the member, yes. I met with the wife.
You did not chart a home visit in general. It was specific to each member of the
Right.
of the plan. And your job there, as far as visiting the home, could you brief overview of what your job description was with Affinity?
It was, I'm tired as a care manager. And we're not allowed to physically assess the patient. It was just kind of educating the patient on like medication, and gathering resources they may need. Because most of them live alone or with each other that may not be aware of any resources that were out there that needed, such as handrails in the bathroom, to keep down falls in the home. So you just educate and kind of refer resources to the members. So it wasn't like I go and check the blood pressure, none of that. You couldn't do that.
So each time you went you discussed with each particular member specifically?
You have to do that. You can talk to daughters, wives, you have to talk to the member directly.
So were you were not required to lay eyes on as part of your assessment of the home?
Do an assessment, like a physical, any kind of physical assessment. Assessment was just checking with whomever you visited with. That's the way I was trying. We didn't have to do any kind of hands-on, anything.
Was it,
I didn't gather any medicines and medication reconciliation, none of that. Just asked if they were out or something of that nature, were they able to get their medicines, mainly just talking, educating.
okay, so you relied on this member's wife for this information? Okay, but at one place you'd said that she was not at full mental capacity.
To me, she wasn't, but that don't mean you still don't talk with them and help them and, discuss things with them. When affinity assigning these patients, they know that they may not be there mentally, but they still assign them. I couldn't help, who they assign.
Did you feel that she was, had a mental capacity enough to give you information about what her husband needed?
Most days, I felt like she could tell me what her husband needed or what he didn't need, but some days, no. Some days would be short. Are we okay to the point? You don't need anything.
So your requirements for documentation were simply to discuss what you, or chart what you discussed?
Mhm.
So in your notes, whenever you said that the member was assessed for medication compliance, what did that mean? In your opinion, what
That's
did
what
it?
I was saying. And you can't get together the medicines and make sure, shake them or check them, and make sure that you can do that. You just have to ask. So when I say about medication, I'm asking. That's what the member said.
At any point when you were seeing this member specifically, did you have a conversation with him or lay eyes on him? Mhm.
You ever seen him for a while? I have, but as I remember, it's been a while. He was kind of not all with it either at times, but he would be allowed to still drive and go places, and he would be gone a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Why did you stop going on your visits? The last one was in May, is that correct? May 4th, May 4th?
The last visit.
Yeah, why did you stop?
Because I had, a representative from Humana called me in an argument about how, not affinity, because she didn't have a problem the way I visited because it's what they taught me, but Humana called me one day and was asking about how I was visiting and that patient was deceased and was I still going, and I think they believed that I wasn't going, just like the complaint that was filed, but I was going because I still was seeing the wife. So that's how I ended up stopped going from the argument they had with me.
But the reason you were going was to check on the husband.
The
And
husband-
once he deceased, you were to stop.
The husband and the wife.
No,
So I do have a question for you, Ms. Eskridge. You made the comment earlier that Affinity told you to document differently. However, in the job description that you applied for, it's listed LPN preferred. As an LPN, would it not be appropriate to document as you were educated how to?
I documented just like Affinity taught me. That's how I documented it.
But I'm asking you, as an LPN that has been educated, and you're in the role of a preferred, per your job description, per the notes,
Preferred, not required, okay,
as an LPN,
okay.
why would you not document as a licensed practical nurse?
I don't understand what you're asking. I mean, I documented the way the way I was trained for that position. I don't know what you're asking me,
If you're working in the role
right?
of an LPN,
Okay.
why would you have not documented like an LPN?
What didn't I document like an LPN? I documented according to the visas I did.
You're telling us that you were told to document differently than an LPN.
Not different, I just told them, and trained me on how they wanted me to document. I don't know. All right, I don't know what you're asking me.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions from the board? I do have a question for you, or for the parties to address on the complaint. This just may be semantics, but it looks like the word clients is used, plural. And then member is used singularly, and then there's members home again singularly. So I just want to be pointed, direct the board in the record where the evidence showed that the licensee was assigned to both the husband and the wife. And then Mr. Walker, because the board's complaint explained the singular plural distinction there.
Yeah, so I didn't sign this complaint, but I do believe that it says respondent documented multiple visits to a client post-mortem. And the records show that the member.
Well, see, okay, so let's see. Okay, so here it says responded documented visits to clients that did not occur. So to me, that sounds like more than one client. And then it says she documented multiple visits to a client post-mortem. And then it's saying that she noted that she visited the member's home, and that's singular. So did the husband and wife live together? As if so, show me in the record. I mean, I just need some help with that, understanding that.
I believe in the assessment notes, and I believe she testified to that as well, but in the assessment notes and in the transcript, there's several conversations and during the course of the hearing where they alluded, or it was fleshed out who the actual member was.
Okay.
It was on visits, and that's all in the transcript and the record as well.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, it's in the record.
So with the complaint, what is the complaint charge in here? Is it saying that she documented visits to clients, the clients being poor, husband and wife that did not occur? Or that she documented or that she documented multiple visits to a client? Like what is the, what's the charge against? Which
The charge is that she made negligent entries on records is the charge. And the facts in that support that show that she documented multiple visits to a client post-mortem. I don't know that it specifically says. There's only one of those at that home that had deceased. And it states the day that member was deceased. I think that kind of fleshes out who it was on and who the complaint is in relation to.
So it's not that she falsely documented visits to the wife.
No, it's that she falsely documented visits, as it says in the complaint, to a client post-mortem. And then it does say that she visited the member's home, but that's the dates. And that's the dates after the member passed away. And the assessment notes address that there were assessments made on the deceased member.
Okay. I'll let her.
And that's a part of our issue with this complaint is that she's supposed to have notice of what she's actually accused of doing. And when you look at this, a reasonable person could possibly think, well, they're just saying that I did not visit the home. Well, according to her, she did, but there's also reference to members and also reference to the member's home. And she's supposed to be put on notice of what you're actually charging her with. And then when she gets to the hearing, it's more so testimony about what she put in the records when she made the visit. Well, that's not what this complaint talks about. she's only required to defend what's in this complaint.
Your Honor, if I could interject, I totally disagree because I believe the charge is very clear that it's in falsifying entries on records. And it's very clear that it was on a client that had passed away and the date it was on. And it's very clear the date those assessments were made. I don't see how a reasonable person couldn't understand.
May I say something really quick? We do see the statute, but we know that the statute is the law that's being broken. But every complaint has to include sufficient facts to put you on notice of how you broke that law. It's not enough to just say we're charging you with violating this statute. She's required or she's allowed to know what specifically are you saying that I did to violate the statute? And that is a major issue with this complaint and the way it was written and the notice that was given to her.
Ms. Eskridge, I need some clarification here. You went out to the home, you had 2 clients in the home, husband and a wife, correct? When you documented on them, did the husband have a chart and the wife have a chart? Explain to me how this works, because I understand that you work for Affinity, it was a third party to Humana, so you actually worked under the Humana umbrella. So that's not 100% wrong. And then it went to some other system. Just explain to me, did the husband have a chart and the wife have a chart?
Yes, in a sense, but even though the husband had a chart, I still was allowed to chart in his chart that I met with the wife. I still could say, patient, member's home, member medication is filled or whatever, the case may be.
Okay, so when you made, it sounds to me like 4 visits you made to the home after the husband expired.
Right.
And you making those 4 visits, did all 4 visits, the documentation went into the husband's chart?
Both. You have to chart on, I had to chart on both my patients.
But you told me that the husband has a chart, the wife has a chart.
Right.
So did the documentation that you charted on, your documentation, did it go into the husband's file or the wife's file?
No, I had to chart on both the patients, not patients, both the members.
But after the husband ceased to have a pulse, his chart was closed.
Supposed to be, but it wasn't on my records, no.
Okay. So you were charting on someone, or you were charting on a couple in the husband's chart who was expired.
Right. Correct.
And in there, you were charting that you made a visit to the home.
Right.
And that you did, I don't have it all in front of me, but what you did for the
Whatever
couple.
I did, correct.
So you were charting with someone who didn't exist.
Basically, but I didn't know he didn't exist and I was talking to the wife. So I chart with the wife, tell me, the other member tell me.
Was the wife cognizant? Was she clear?
She seemed to be, I mean, they depended on her, I mean, so.
So in 4 visits, have you seen someone who, I see in the transcript, you stated that he looked a lot younger than what he was. And, I see all the back and forth that you had with the husband and the whoever. You know where I'm going with this.
Okay.
He's expired. The wife, who I understand they lean on for information, in 4 visits never informed you that her husband had expired?
No.
No one in the family, no one in the home. You went and saw them and no one told you that he had
I
expired.
mean, it was just him and her in the home and no, because had I known either through Humana or the Affinity or the wife, why would I chart on them? No.
That's what we want to know. That's what we
No,
hope.
I didn't know. And she acted like he was fine and our normal.
Let me ask you this. I know, and I'm quite familiar with electronic medical records. I'm assuming that's where your documentation went to, or records.
It was not an electronic medical record because I think that would have been directed through Humana. It was a system that Affinity had set up. And the documentation I sent went to Affinity, did not go to Humana. And they were the one that transferred it over after they got it to Humana.
Okay, so you make the documentation and you submit it electronically?
Submit it on the computer, yes.
So do you submit it to a certain chart? Or do you just submit a bulk of information to Affinity and they decide where it goes?
They give me a list and I chart and just send the list back. And they send the patient information to, I never dealt directly with Humana.
Okay, you're missing me here. When you make your documentation, do you assign your documentation to the patient's record it goes to?
Right, yes.
Yes. Okay, so the documentation, the 4 visits you made, excuse me, after this gentleman expired, you directed that documentation to his chart.
I tried in his record, yes, and I sent all my records to Affinity Nurse. Of like, you have to chart on, let's say I saw 6 people in a day. And those 6 people that evening or later that day, I sent all the 6 people I documented on to Affinity Nursing. And they determine when and how it goes. And I'm not sure how they sent it to me, but they were the ones that sent it over.
That's one question to follow up, just when you were speaking with the wife, when you would go and make your visits, did you ever ask the wife to talk to the husband?
I had been seeing him a while, so it's fine if I didn't talk directly to the husband. When he was there, we did. So when he wasn't there, I would ask about him. How's everybody? How's everything? Are you out of medicine? That type of conversation. So I didn't say no. I did not directly say, "Where is he? Where is your husband? Can I see him?" I didn't directly say that.
So did Humana reimburse for these visits?
Excuse me?
Did Humana reimburse for these visits? Did Humana pay for the visits you made?
They pay, yeah, I guess. But they were, the 4 visits I made, yeah, they paid, but at the very end, my pay was held, so I'm assuming they were paid back.
Ms. Estridge, I just have one question based on what Ms. Clinton just asked you. You had just made a statement that it was just him and her in the home, and that's who you were documenting on.
In the home, yes.
But you just stated to Ms. Clinton that you asked the patient's wife, how is everybody?
They had,
Who's everybody?
they had kids. She had brothers and sisters, I believe. Yeah, just the family. Which you just asked about the family as a nurse.
Well, that's what I'm trying to clarify, because when we asked about the.
Yeah, they were the only ones in the home. Yes, ma'am. Any additional, thing further from the board? Any additional questions to follow up from the board?
Maybe beating the horse, but I need to really understand this. One last question I'm gonna have for you. The charge against you is that you made documentation entries into the husband's chart when he had expired.
The charges were that I visited a home and that I didn't go, and I did.
What I understand is the charges are that entries were made into an expired man's chart. Am I correct?
That's what the charge says. Yes, that's exactly what it says.
And you're agreeing that 4 visits were made and documentation was entered into an expired man's chart.
That I spoke with the wife, yes.
But-
About the patient, yes.
But your documentation included education that you gave them.
Her, when he was speaking, if I educate the wife, I said I educated a member. Wife is a member.
Is there anything to identify whether it was the wife or the husband, because they were both members?
I don't think so, but that's how the Humana told me. That's how they trained me to chart. I didn't have to lay hands on anybody. I didn't have to check a blood pressure or anything like that. Just care manager.
Well, it's very clear that you didn't even visualize the individual you were coming there. Because you didn't document it.
Right.
Were you licensed by the Mississippi Board of Nursing or by Humana?
By Mississippi Board of Nurses.
The Nurse Practice Act, the law, that your license falls under is what you're held responsible to defend, correct?
Just one, if either of y'all know, is there a job description in any of this from Affinity? Have y'all knew?
Maybe. Not,
Not in the record as I saw it.
I don't.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? Hearing nothing, at this time, I'll conclude this hearing. Well, we'll recess. The board will announce its decision today. And we'll issue an order consistent with the announcement today. But it won't be like right now, so you can wait or you can leave and you can just get that in the mail. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion from the board to consider whether or not to go into closed
Make a
determination.
motion, you go into
To
closed determination.
determine whether or not we have grounds to go into executive session to deliberate on this appeal.
Second.
All in favor? At this time, I'll entertain a motion from the board to actually go into executive session to deliberate on this appeal.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor? Any opposition? The board is now in executive session. I'm entertaining a motion from the board to come out of executive session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, I'll announce the board's decision made in executive session in the matter of State of Mississippi Board of Nursing, appeal case number 2017-5850. The decision of the board hearing panel is affirmed. This concludes the appeals for today. Ms. Exridge, an order will be prepared consistent with the decision announced today and will be mailed to you within 30 to 45 days. Thank you.